The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, second part of the classic fantasy trilogy. This one won 2 Oscars, Best Sound Editing and Best Visual Effects, and was nominated for 4 more, Best Picture, Best Editing, Best Sound, and Set Direction. Seems like a small number overall, but you have to remember that these 3 films were coming out back to back year after year. Fellowship swept the awards the previous year, and the general understanding is that the Academy fully expected to give all the awards to Return of the King the next year as the capping point of the trilogy. So they gave a lot less to The Two Towers so that one franchise wouldn't dominate the awards 3 years straight, which isn't necessarily fair if you think about it, but there you have it. In terms of the quality of the films themselves, I'd say all 3 are basically equal, and they remain as amazing as they always have been, with The Two Towers being no exception, really. Fantastically paced story, great editing to keep us on track with the multiple storylines resulting from the Fellowship now being broken up and groups of characters going separate ways. Terrific music, terrific cinematography, acting, great special effects. One thing is the large use of prosthetic makeup, miniatures, trick photography, and tons of extras, and shooting on location instead of relying on CG in every single shot. So the film has not aged as much in that regard. But also, there's Gollum. Gollum, who remains probably the single most impressive example of motion capture performance from Andy Serkis, and at the time was the most groundbreaking special effect in cinema all around. Right now, I'd say it in some of the wider shots especially, you can kind of see it aging, but amazingly, in the close-ups, where clearly the look is more polished and they gave it more effort, it still looks realistic, which blows my mind, seeing as the movie is now over 2 decades old, and yet this fully CG character looks better than many of the modern day ones in other films. While we're at the subject of aging, one thing that hasn't aged very well about the film is how ridiculous it is that in the entire trilogy, essentially, there's only 3 female characters, 2 of which end up being in love with the same guy, Aragorn. And I get that it comes with Tolkien's writing and it's definitely a product of his time, but still it is a bit silly when you think about it. Another thing that has aged very well as a contrast is its environmental messaging, with the war between Ents and Isengard. The criticism of unchecked industrialism and destruction of nature is pretty clear here, and it's something that perhaps is even more relevant today than it was 20 years before. From the filmmaking perspective, the movie is also quite interesting because, as some people have pointed out, the whole Battle for Helm's Deep sequence is essentially a movie within a movie. When it comes to the way it's structured, it has its own complete 3-act structure and plays out exactly like a full feature would. And of course, as a battle sequence, is simply downright awesome. I mean, not much else to say really, or rather, I could go on for 2 more hours explaining in detail why every single thing works so well about the film for me. But I think it's better to just remind everyone that perhaps it's time for another rewatch. It's certainly gonna be as rewarding as ever.